Hey everybody, and welcome back to a new episode of the Navs Effect podcast. When I say new, it's not just new in the general word. It's new because we have a new setup, as you guys see. Actually, that's why I didn't have an episode on our usual Wednesday time slot because I was busy moving houses, and here I am now. We're getting the podcast back on the road, or should we say, in this room. It's gonna be fun. Today we have a special guest joining us and we'll have more interesting episodes to come, including new partnerships for this podcast that I'll be announcing eventually. So sit back because in a moment we'll be joined by one of the top sports agents in the country today. Be right back. Okay, welcome back to the episode. We are joined by PJ Pilares of Titan Management Group, someone who has been in the sports scene of the Philippines for a very long time. And he is going to come on the podcast tonight to share some of his experiences and stories and what it is like being an agent in the country, particularly basketball, which is, we know, the heart and soul for many Filipinos. PJ, thanks for joining me, man. How are you?
Hey Naveen, happy to be here again. Thanks for having me.
You're always welcome. And it's a big time for you, should we say, here at Titan Management Group. You've got a few talents coming up who will be performing, particularly internationally. Dwight Ramos, another season with Hokkaido, and Francis Lopez making his B League debut as well. And you got other guys too, like Isaac Go, Gian Mamuyac, Tyler Teo in the local scene, who many fans are always eager about. But PJ, since we mostly talk college ball in this episode, and I think it's fair to say that college basketball players recently have become an interesting point of recruitment for teams from abroad, right? What's the process like nowadays when you're entering the latter stages of your college career, or if you're really talented, even the first few years? Because back in the day, the PBA I watched growing up, the PBA you certainly watched growing up. The plan was simple. It was 4 or 5 years in college, and then you go to the PBA, you join the draft. But in the last half decade, we've seen that change. So, what's the thinking now for the top college players in the country?
Thanks, Naveen. Well, primarily the goal is for you to perform, regardless whether you're coming out of high school or you're midway in your college career, right? So I've mentioned this to a lot of people. Early 2020, that was when Asian basketball somehow became borderless, right? More opportunities for athletes, not just for the game, but entirely right for all the sports. And for myself, the approach for players that I always tell them is the basketball is your main stage. It's an opportunity for you to showcase what you got, whether it's for your current team or whether it's an opportunity locally or overseas. So the take for me is, be in the best position possible. Make sure that there's a proper communication with your coaches, with the management, for you to be able to have a great fit, and in order for you to be able to maximize the opportunity.
So, the general perspective, and to be fair, it's quite accurate, is that the main reason these players want to take their talents abroad is because the offers are much more lucrative than what they could potentially get here in the Philippines. But it's more than that, right? I mean, it's one thing to get to Korea or Japan, it's another thing to stay there, it's another thing to have longevity because there's so many changes involved. These players are moving countries, living by themselves, entering a new culture, and that all becomes a little overwhelming sometimes. So what's the process like when you have someone who potentially can go abroad? Is it okay, here's the offer, but here's ABC, what you have to consider as well, and
Mhm.
here are the different new realities you have to face, here are the expectations out of you. The latest player you've had to really think about all these factors for was Francis Lopez, because he was coming off
Mhm.
a pretty stellar season with UP, which was capped off by his clutch performance in the finals. And then here comes his opportunity, right? So walk us through what that was like and what it's usually like for your other players as well.
On top of my list, actually would be the structure more than the financial part. It's really having something set in terms of the calendar of the season, the off season. For me, that plays a major role in terms of what league you could identify. But again, that also determines what your talent level is. As I always say to all of my players, less than 10 players can make it overseas, and at any given time, given that the deliverables are much more higher than a local player, right? So in order for you to be given an opportunity to play overseas, you really have to be elite at something. Or if it's early, then you're banking on potential, right? So in order for me to commit Francis to play overseas after playing 2 years of collegiate basketball, it's it's really connecting to something stable, which is a long-term deal. I'm not sure if I've shared this with you before, but Francis signed a 3-year deal, which by far is the longest contract for overseas players,
And all
whether local
guaranteed,
or
all three
all
years.
guaranteed. So whether local or you're coming in as an Asian quota. And for Francis, I've been very transparent about it as to what his next level is. I tell him, you play here at the collegiate level. There are a lot of things that you're good at, but at the same time, you're not great at. So similar to what I shared with you last February, us leaving for the US to train for one whole month was big for him because it just gave so many, doors for him to really look at and knock on and see that his game isn't where it should be yet if he wants to make the jump professionally. Fortunately for us, we were able to, get some eyes and ears while we were doing our workouts there. We got scouts and GMs to see to see Francis for the first time, and that was the opportunity for him to play overseas. Not a lot of scouts, believe it or not, watch UAAP games or NCAA games, right? It's more of the federation. It's the national team level that they see. Some over the last 4 years, would watch games for collegiate basketball. But the unfortunate circumstance there is a lot of those players who transfer and take their talents at the pro level normally don't turn out to be as good as they would want it. So that's the process mainly. It's really looking at the structure and looking at something tangible. In this case, I'll be very transparent. If Francis got a 1-year deal, I wouldn't even go for it. If it was a two, maybe would consider, but three was really by far the deal that made it happen for us. So even the school, and I can share that with you when I spoke with the coaches and the management. Everyone bought in. They were happy for the opportunity for Francis, but obviously not happy with him leaving, given that he still had few more years left for his basketball team in UP.
So I don't want you to give me the specific figure, but the money Francis would make 3 years in Japan, how many years would it take to make that in the PBA if you had to compare?
Well, obviously it's going to be different from because there's a salary cap. If you would go straight to what the what the UPC or the uniform players contract is, then it's going to be there's going to be a huge gap. But believe it or not, for me, even if we don't compute the gap, it's more of the way it's set up now. Especially, kudos to them. It's the B League. It's only been running for formally as when they merged um, I may not be exactly correct, but it should be around 8 or 9 years. So it's really young for a professional league, right? But the fact that they're ultra progressive, they're learning on the fly, they're changing, they're coming with different league formats, setups year after year is a great thing. It's not everything is a hit. There are a few things that they really need to change, but those are growing pains. They're understanding. One thing I always share with players and other people is that the playoff format in Japan is quite weird because all of the series are best of three.
Mm.
And the series for the quarters and the semis are back to back to back. It's not even these are 3 games in a row for a playoff series,
Wow.
right? And you don't, you stay in one home court. And then the difference is when they reach the finals, if it reaches, if the series eventually is tied at 1-1, that's the only time they have a break. And then the final game is played on a Tuesday. Imagine. So if you're thinking about, prime time, all those, particular dates that you have in mind for a decider for a sudden death, they still haven't really figured that out, that part yet. But they're a progressive organization. I'm sure at some point in time they will realize. So those are things that that are rarely talked about. And for me, it's not about what's here and what's there. It's more of it really depends on what the talent level of the player is. And
Mm.
for me, I never sugarcoat. When I feel a player can't make it, I'm not gonna tell him or her that there's a chance to play overseas. Right? I think that by far is the most important thing when you run sports management or a sports agency for that matter.
So I don't want to turn this, and it's not my intention to turn this into a PBA versus B League versus KBL thing because that's been done a good amount
Hmm.
of times already. But having players you represent in each league, what are aspects of Korea and Japan that the PBA can take and implement in their own league? Because, like you said, Japan is, in Filipino terms, binata pa lang yan, di ba? Medyo bata pa lang yan. And then, and the KBL naman, it's been around, but not as much as the PBA. I mean, the PBA is about to celebrate 50 years. So
Hmm.
age-wise, experience, tradition, history, all aspects that are important in sports lore. Look at the NBA, for example. The PBA has it. But many believe that these Asian leagues are more progressive in terms of what they're doing with their league. So what are things they're doing that you think the local league can learn from?
I can name so many, but realistically speaking, it's hard to compete with a league that's home and away. First, that's the
Mm.
first part, right? Because home and away, regardless of what your standing is, you're always gonna have your core. You're gonna have your own set of fans rocking the gym, right? Regardless whether you have a 115 season or whether it's 15-1, right? Um, but for comparison, I think it's really just the proactive part. It's coming with something certain. It all boils down for me with planning, right? And I always say this: I grew up as a PBA fan in the late '80s and the early '90s. There was no other option. It was PBA basketball or nothing, really. And I I noticed that over the years there are more other options that you may have. At that time in the late '90s, you would have cable, and then in the early 2000s you have the internet. So it becomes you do have other options, but for the comparison point, it's just really having something certain. for the league. I can name a lot in terms of um, in-game feel, the fan interaction, um, the making making more effort with regard to connecting with the fan, right?
Mm-hmm.
I don't want to make it um, you know uh, a debate or an argument as to what they should do because it's hard to be in their position as well. And for me, like out of all the 26 players that I have 17 in the PBA, right? And they're doing well, and I'm happy. Their career is solid, and I can guarantee you that for the next 25, 30 years of the PBA, there's no other league that can compete against the PBA in the Philippines, right? Um, it's for me the way to move forward, really, going back to what you said, is just really, being proactive and having better preparation. Because when you look at the leagues that you mentioned, from the KBL to the B League, those are the things that really stand out, right? And as to share with the KBL is also a commercial league. It's not it's home and away because they have their own gyms, but it's similar with the setup of ownership. The difference, actually, right, which for me is a bigger challenge, is they only have 10 teams. So imagine during the regular season, you meet a minimum of five,
Mm-hmm.
right? And then if you meet each other in the playoffs, then automatically it would reach a higher number. So those are things I could share with you. I'm not gonna touch on the sensitive parts of it.
I get you and I feel you. No worries. Do you think though that the Philippines basketball scene can ever get to a point where that home and away format is possible? Now I get that the PBA is mostly a commercial league, and I agree with you when you said that the PBA is probably going to be the top basketball league in the country for definitely the foreseeable future. I mean, just look at the talent that's been joining the last few seasons. But even if, because I can't imagine something like the San Miguel Davao some beermen, or the you know Magnolia Bacolod uh, chicken. Actually, that sounds pretty good. Now that I think about it. But can we at least get to a point with the PBA? Do you think logistically it's possible that instead of out of town games being once a week traditionally on Saturdays, we see a week where, okay, Tuesday there's a game in Ilocos, Thursday there's a game in Bacolod, Friday maybe there's a game in General Santos. We can have it in
Mm-hmm,
Manny
mm-hmm,
Pacquiao's massive
mm-hmm.
basketball gym that he built, right? There are basketball courts and social media now with technology that makes it, I think, more accessible in different parts of the country. Or do you feel we're still quite far off?
As it is, logistically, it's a challenge for the country. Um, with the group, with the group that runs it, there are a lot of ideas that are being shared. And again, it all boils down to execution. As to venues, they're currently available. It's currently being done at a much more local level in the MPBL. So we know it's possible. For me, it needs a different set of eyes, a different take. Hopefully that type of injection hopefully happens soon, because the talent level of the PBA, and you can talk about the ones that who have retired for the last few years. They know, and they've admitted that the talent level of the PBA is really at the highest too.
Now let's go back to Francis, because you said something earlier where the scouts from Asia, Japan look at the way players perform with Gilas in the international league, because the KBL and the B League, they use the FIBA system in terms of how they run their games. But Francis hadn't played for Gilas for a while. So would you say that his recruitment was solely based on the workouts he had in LA? And if that's the case, wouldn't it wouldn't it be smart for top college prospects in the future years to spend their off seasons out of town for extended periods of time, like Francis did, to maybe get these opportunities?
For me, that was the one that ignited everything
Mm,
for Francis. And from there, teams, a couple of teams started doing more research. They asked more, film from me. But the interaction, the face-to-face value was very critical. And the training and everything happening, whether in Europe, China, Australia, the Philippines, it's not too different, man. What really the critical part is the competition. So
mm,
when you join Open Gym, that's when you understand, okay, this is how far I am, or this is how close I am to elite level, right? Um, that for me is one thing that's crucial because you're able to assess yourself versus what you've been used to in your home country, right? That works for a lot of them because when they play there, you have a lot of players from Asia, others from Australia, a lot from North America. So you're able to assess where you are. Now, this is the first time we did it. It was an effort from the management group to send Francis over there. That was his first ever trip to the US. As you may know, his he had visa trouble during the 2020 when he was supposed to be part of Overtime Elite. And at that time, we weren't managing him yet. We only started managing Francis in 2023. So we want to do that more for players who we feel have the opportunity to make it at the next level, right? For us, regardless, if we don't have anything set, whether it's the NBA, Europe, Japan, PBA, Korea. That's where we want to, that's where when we look back, when we sit down, we want to make sure that we were able to maximize their full potential.
if Francis was playing in the UAP season right now, is he the best player in the league after his LA training?
I can't say that because because he isn't playing. But for me, the things that he was able to pick up and he was able to do it on a consistent basis, he'd be top three because his game has really changed a lot. His shooting has improved significantly. Boosted by the game decider
Clinching shot, yeah.
clinching shot he made. So that really boosted his confidence. Now it was all about reps and somehow changing some of the mechanics. His mid range is available now. He's not forcing the issue from
Not
before
going one on four.
because he can do that here. But in any pro league, he can't do that because players are smarter, they're bigger, they know how to use their bodies. So but at the UAAP level, I can confidently say that he's top three.
I remember there was that one game, Pinoy Liga, when he just got back from out of town against CSB,
Yeah.
who they don't have an FSA, but they're still a pretty good team, right? In the NCAA, except in yesterday's game. I don't know what happened there. But Francis, I was shocked because I was calling the game on commentary
Mm,
and he was pulling out all these moves, back to the basket, reverse turnaround shots,
yes.
attack the middle, draw the defenders, find the open men in the corner, hop step, drop step, spin moves in the post. And there was always that one aspect of his game that was lacking for me, which was he could go like, for example, 80 miles an hour, but he would just keep revving up, revving up, revving up, right? And defenders knew that he would just keep going up instead of stopping and then going again. He was starting to learn that stop, assessed the situation, and then he realized even if he stops, he was athletic and fast enough to go again, and it would leave more people in the dust. And I was watching that game and I was like, wow, I mean, he is gonna make UP such a formidable threat to go back to back. And then not long after, he got the offer, which you said was a 3-year deal, and he took it, rightfully so. Good for his career. And I immediately thought that is going to be such a big loss for UP, because when you look at UP's roster right now, what they need is something of what Francis can provide in many factors. I want to get into the Titan management part of it in a bit, but I also want to bring up Dwight, who, this is just my subjective and personal take on it, but I feel from your crop of players, Dwight is the face. Not just because of the way he plays, but also literally because of his face, because of how much business that face alone brings, okay? And I'm sure you know about this. But Dwight, you know, has the game to back up the hype. He is silent, kind of stoic sometimes, not a lot of emotion, even keeled. And one of the greatest what ifs ever in UAP basketball is what would have happened if Dwight played in that Ateneo core with Kwame, with Gian, who's also your player, Tyler, also your player, the championship level roster. So how did the Dwight, journey accelerate? Was it also because of Gilas, the way he performed, which opened the doors from, instead of going to the UAP first, I can go straight to the pros?
Mhm. Quick story that I'd like to share. So this was in 2019, and at that time, majority, really majority of my players, my student athletes were from Ateneo. And, I had I do have my bias because of the character, the way they trained. Um, and at that time, the goal was to always, connect with the athletes through my current and existing players. Because, that's how you see when you really have good value. And I was fortunate enough to, you know, to have Adrian Wong, Mamu, and Tyler at that time, and they were telling me that there's this new set of players coming in, and I told them, oh, have them visit the office. So that was in 2019. I think this was just a week after they arrived. So Adrian brought Eli, Dwight, and Chu Davis. So, we had a quick meeting here in the office. After that, we headed out for lunch. And what I always tell the guys, and I don't know if I shared with you casually, I would always tell them to always meet with other groups, agents, handlers, to have a better understanding of what the field looks like. And then that's when you make that decision, right? Fortunately, after a week and a half, they all came back to me and they committed, right? So Chu, Eli, and Dwight. This was tail end of 2019, I think November, December, right? And that's when the season ended. The White's name became popular because they flew to, I think, CDO for the Jesuit meet. And that's when people started calling him Saint Dwight because there was that viral video, right? Fast forward, he played his first Gilas game in Bahrain with a different coach at that time. He was solid, nothing out of nothing out of the park, but he was solid. And the pandemic happened. During the pandemic, there was a bubble. Fortunately for them, they played in Pampanga. This was the FIBA Asia. This was when we had a good run.
When
We beat
SJ hit the game
Korea
winner.
with a game winner against Korea. And from there, similar to all of the legs tournaments that Dwight has joined, he was stable, consistent all throughout, right? And fortunately for me, connected with TNG, as early as 2019, I already had a FIBA license. Just because I knew that at some point in time, these leagues would open up Asian quota imports, right? I wanted to be first. in order, to cater for the players, whether, they're Filipino or different nationalities or from the US. We've never just because we're Filipino wanted just to get Filipinos. We want to get, whoever who's passionate and has the right character for the game. So when that happened, I started getting calls from teams, from other agents, other scouts about Dwight Ramos. And because of the pandemic and the bubble setup, we were really seriously considering playing pro. But we had to lay down, all the non-negotiables and the things that we're turning down once we commit to pro. We were fortunate to have a very good dialogue with the Federation SVP. We were able to talk to the school, Ateneo. And, when we were closer to the decision, we informed everybody, all the stakeholders about this. And regardless of, what we would miss, that Ateneo Lasal rivalry, the Battle of Katipunan, we were looking at, this opportunity to turn pro was something that was really hard to turn down, given the situation also with the bubble, with the pandemic. So that was the process. And, for Dwight growing up in the US, at that time he was about to turn 21. So he felt, this could also be a good time to jump. And for me as an agent, it's not about, my bias for the school or for whatever opportunities were present here locally. It was more of what's best for him, right? And that's the right decision, right? And when I look at it, if you play collegiate basketball and if you don't perform based on how you performed at the national level, then it just kills your stock. You've seen that other players who decide not to join the draft, whether it's in the NBA or any other league, and if they, turn out to have a tough season, then, you're just losing your opportunities, and you only have, one or two chances, sometimes not even one, right? In order for you to make a career, for the sport that you truly love.
Was it a difficult conversation with Ateneo to make that happen?
For sure, man, it was because they didn't want Dwight to leave, and they understood the opportunity, but all hands on deck. I was on the phone you know every 30 minutes, 1 hour with everybody involved at that time, and there was nothing certain, which was kind of hard from their end. There was nothing. It was never about financial. It was more of what was more stable, and that was the B League.
So you also recently added a talent to your roster in Gani Stevens of the UP Fighting Maroons. What is it about Gianni? Because you only recruit a certain type. Like you said, you only have 26 in your roster right now, which compared to other agencies, I would say is more towards quality over quantity. So what was it about Gianni that enticed you guys to recruit him?
First, his ability. His b-ball IQ is high. If you watch, if you, if you're a b-ball geek, you'd see his short rolls are beautiful. His under goal is a thing of beauty. His left hand finish is a trait that you'd hardly see from bigs. He has good hands. His character is on a different level. Probably one of the nicest guys I've met on and off the court, and that's what stood out. We rarely get student athletes since our focus is at the pro level, but given that there's more competition, which is great, we wanted to secure him, right? And I have a very good relationship with UP. It was a long process. I make sure, the family is involved, and I see so much potential with GS with Gani. Given that he's a sponge, right? Number one thing that you should have when you already have time on the floor is the right type of character, and he is an awesome guy.
For sure. Yeah. Seems like he's a down to earth guy. And when he does get a lot of minutes, he tends to produce. The last few months, we've seen that with Phil Oil and the last game against UE, where he was productive in limited time. And I can only imagine those numbers could possibly go up if he's playing in a pro level where there are extra minutes, or the game isn't as fast paced, the game isn't decided by the guards as much like it is
Mhm.
in college. Now, let's talk about Titan a little bit, because Titan as a brand has grown. You know, started off as a barber shop. I think fair to say molded after the barbershop culture in the US, where people come, get haircuts, talk shop, talk sports, maybe have a few drinks. And then you also became a store. Well, you were always a store, but then the part of the brand where you sell the sneakers, sell the outfits, it grew over time more and more and more. You started having player exclusives with the likes of LeBron James, Sabrina Ionescu, other brands as well, like Anta. You had an exclusive with Anta too. Now you have new merch coming out. You have players who are signed with the brand. So like a Clint Escamis, but he has a separate sports agent. Or I believe like the Alfonso brothers too, if I'm not mistaken. They're part of it as well. But there's also TMG, the Titan management side of things. So how are the brands different from each other the way you see it? And how was the journey to get there? And are there more different plans, new announcements to come?
Thanks for that. I think we were together during, we had our 15th year. We had an event, which is just last August. So, 15 years in the industry. I've been in retail for such a long time. Myself, together with the other partners, we've known each other for, more than 2 decades. So it's what we've been trying to do until now is just really to really have a basketball collective, right? So under the Titan umbrella, you have the retail, the barbershop, the merchandise, you have our vertical media and Slam, and then you have the management group, right? As far as to the ambassadors, we do have some crossovers, particularly Calvin of Tana, who's a TNG and a DVT, and then Gian Mamuyac, who's a DVT and a TNG, and also Francis Lopez. We've always been, you know, open. We've always been inclusive. That's why we have other players who are managed or not part of TMG to be part of DBT. So that's never been a challenge. In the same manner, I have other players who are part of different brands, right? And the likes of Tyler or James Lapo, they're partners also with other brands that are available in the market. So there's a lot of good connection within the community. And that's what we've been trying to do from the start. It's plugging in those holes, addressing things that we could address within our control in order for us to uplift the basketball community. That's always been the goal.
Is Coach Jeff also part of the management group?
He isn't part of the day to day, but he's a partner of Titan. But for TNG, he is not involved. It's purely me.
If you don't mind me asking this, have there been, moments of trouble in terms of people saying it's a conflict of interest that coach in the PBA also is a partner with a group with an agency and there are players involved? How have you guys maneuvered those waters?
We've never had issues. Never, no one has brought it up. So if ever they do, it's nothing that we're worried about or we'd have to navigate through. So it's never been a point of concern.
Are there other players you guys are looking at to joining either the Deer Valley group or the Titan Management group?
Of course, yes, we're looking at a lot of a lot of players. We're looking at the women's, the men's. Just looking at the level of talent now for all divisions. It's awesome. It's exciting because, like what I said, I go back to that point where everybody has access to all games, whether what part of the country, what part of the world rather you are in. So it's a good opportunity because if you perform, you're gonna be seen, you're gonna be recognized, right? It's just a matter of what really best suits you.
Absolutely. Now, let's get to some of the mailbag questions here from our members of the Navs Effect podcast community.
Sure.
So, okay, this first question is from Paulo. Paulo wants to know, PJ, how do you pick or choose the players that you represent?
First up is talent. Nothing bigger than that. But from the initial meet, I'm I have a very solid connection with all of our guys. We want to make sure that we're on the same page as always. And then the most important thing for me, and it may sound may sound corny a bit, but it's character. If you're willing to listen, from the whole family is able to absorb what you're trying to share, and if they do understand that you're really gunning for the best opportunity for them, then for me that is the ultimate winning formula. I always tell them that a contract is never uh, an issue that would get in between us. It's all about understanding that we're aligned. If at some point and they feel that their value isn't being seen or being maximized, then sure, you could go out and do it your way. And fortunately for us, we've never encountered anything like that. We've been in the industry for 9 years now. So for the number one thing really is to go back is the eye test and the character.
So, this just popped into my head now. I have to ask. You spoke about character. I'm sure that for as many players you found a good character, there have been moments of questioning character as well. Did you ever have a meeting with a player or player's parents where there was a very odd or out of the ordinary request that they had that made you think, nope, can't add
Yes,
them?
numerous times, and I'm straight to the point. I never filter anything from the jump. If I feel it doesn't, it doesn't sit well, then I tell them that this may not be the proper place for you. And I've shared this with a lot of other players. At the collegiate level, you actually don't need an agent. You don't need one because what is the agent gonna do? Secure brand deals for you. I mean, we know how limited the opportunity is there, and you can do that. If you need someone, probably an advice, but you don't need an agent. You don't. And I always tell this: at the high school, collegiate level, you shouldn't even be signing contracts,
Mm,
right? The only time you consider signing a contract is, if you have a big deal coming up, or if you have an opportunity to turn pro within the next few months or that next year.
can you give me an
So
example of a weird request you got? A weird one?
the allowance. So
Ah,
the makeup. Unfortunate, and I can share this with you. The setup here in the Philippines is there I can count it in my fingers and one hand. There aren't a lot of formal agencies here. Most of the groups in the country are handlers.
Mm-mm.
And the one thing that's unfortunate is the knowledge about the game isn't as thorough as you would want. It's more of, what we've been used to in the 80s and the 90s, where, when someone looks like an Ateneo idol, maybe, he has a chance to make it. But it's more of a by the way. It's never really been, it's never really taken seriously as
Yeah.
to, going through the development, investing, and, understanding the game more. Right. And for me, that's the best part. That's the reason why I enjoy what we do is because you're a student of the game, man. When you look at somebody, the process, that's the best part. When I think about Francis on how we got him to Japan, or like Dwight or Calvin making it, being a three-time champion in just 4 years. We tell them that, it's not because of what we did, it's really them. But at the very least, they're able to do what, 0.5 to 1% of their growth. Man, that's priceless, right? That's more than anything that you could ask for. So, those things where, when a player is asking for something that's beyond the game, that's a big NO, man. You know that from there, even if that player is really good, and I've done this more than 100 times, Navs, I said no. And one thing that I could somehow be proud of is that I've rejected more players than we've accepted
Mm.
over the last 9 years, especially during the pandemic, because they were calling, because imagine we sent Kmart Carino to Japan. He was my first B-League player before Dwight, right? So at the time, players were calling, and it was just the wave. But I knew that it wasn't sincere and genuine. So I was like, you can be good, but if you don't have that right type of character, then it's gonna be temporary. Having a long career and a great career, man, it's about the discipline, stacking days, and understanding that your circle is tight, and having a clear understanding that these people would love me regardless.
So it's a matter of you fit our standards. We don't adjust our standards based on how the water is flowing right now, how the waves are flowing. Right?
Somehow, I mean, it might sound a little arrogant, but it's not about. It's about being, it's about doing the
Principles.
right thing, having the right values more than anything, right? So for me, that's not hard to do. It's hard to do it, consistently. But we have our off days. Everybody has, but it's being disciplined and doing the right thing when no one is watching. For me, that's the most important thing. So that
Awesome.
integrity part is crucial.
This next question from Jason. Jason was actually blockmates with your brother, he said in our group chat today. So, a very
Nice.
small world. Jason is also from Ateneo. What does PJ think of the NIL rule in the US NCAA? And why does it not seem to apply in the Philippine collegiate sports landscape?
Particularly NCAA, I love it because they've been, as far as my knowledge is concerned, they've been going against the board for over 20 years, right? I'm a big video guy, so I remember that EA Sports came out with a NCAA cover of Ed O'Bannon. So at
Mm-mm.
that time, I mean, I was already, playing that, and I knew that there was already dispute. So now that the players have more freedom for brand partnership, it's great. But there still needs to, they need more guidelines as how to run it, because the challenge there now is, what's the threshold, right? They're able to create more brand deals, but the challenge is, you know um how do they make sure that the players are focused with playing and competing, right? So, but at the same time, for me, it's progress because they've been going against that for like what I mentioned so long. Locally, it's hard to do that here because everything here is under the table because that's how things are done here, right? So even
True.
and for me, this is the thing. That's a very good question, since I've never negotiated anything from a student athlete angle. Never, right? I helped with this, choosing the school. So the first one that we sent to Ateneo was Tyler. So right before Coach Tab was coaching, we already spoke. And prior to that, we met with other schools. And from the jump, I shared with everybody. We can talk about the numbers, but we're never gonna get in the way. Because he's a student athlete. So regardless of what the number is, whether it's small or big, you're not out there to make money. You're there to play and to become a student, right? So the academics part for me is important, right?
Mm-mm.
Obviously, it
Especially in
still depends
Ateneo.
on. Yes, and for me in any school, because if a player thinks that he can make the jump, in this case, like Francis, then sure, right? If you're really serious about your academics, then you can eventually finish that later. There's no number that you need to follow now. Back in the 70s, 80s, yes. But now you want to finish your degree when you're 35, that's not a problem, right? But the opportunity for you to take on something bigger that you've always dreamt of, right? As a professional player, you can't turn that down. So, going back, there could be no NIL rule that could be implemented here because before the NIL rule, was granted in the US, we were already doing a lot of under the table transactions here at all levels, even at grade school or high school, man. So you can't. Plus, the moment you put a cap, for me, that's good, right? Because the wars, the recruiting wars, it should never be about money because your
Mm-hmm.
legacy at the collegiate level is never going to be about how much money you made. It's about the way you competed and the way you played,
That's
right?
true.
And that's exactly the way I approach it. Plus, I think this could be a point where I can share my thoughts in terms of recruitment. For me, when I say basketball is borderless, that means for everyone. But primarily at the school level, if you play, you need to be a student athlete first. So regardless of what school that is, you need to make sure that if your course, is light, you're able to play whatever sport that is and somehow complete whatever deliverables you have academically, then you're good, right? Regardless of who you are, regardless of your nationality or your ethnicity. That for me is the most important factor.
Absolutely. And thanks for that explanation. That was great. Next question here from Ron. How do you feel about players like Kiefer entering the same industry of player management?
I love it because it's about time player empowerment is seen at the Philippine level, right? Nobody knows it more than the players. So for somebody like him to share and reach out and tap to current or eventual pros, it's a great thing. Um, and for me, it's about time. There are very limited options in the country as to having a management group or agency. So that's something that's really welcome.
Next question, also from Jason. Jason wants to ask, what was the most challenging contract that you won for a player?
But for me, I think that would be at the local level here in the PBA, because the negotiation here is quite stiff, very stiff, to the point that I've always received calls from the board as to how come I'm saying no. And I always tell them, it's not, it's not to to reject or disrespect. It's about, just really maximizing what you can get for a player, because that's the only time that you have. The moment you're signed, that's it. Pen to
Mm,
paper. There's nothing else that you can do. Anything that's verbal, you know that, right? From a corporate angle,
absolutely.
that's the only chance you have. So my PBA deals are exciting. Those are the ones that I love,
Was there a
because
player in particular that you went back
a
and
lot.
forth with the team so
I,
much?
I have a lot. I could talk about particularly JV Mokon, because but they love it, and I would tell them, they would hear rumors that executives don't like dealing with me, and I would tell them that's because I'm fighting for you guys.
That's
If
true.
I would just say yes to whatever they're saying, then you don't need an agent. Might as well just keep whatever percentage that I'm getting from you, right?
Right. But in that
So
situation, has there been a moment where a player's like, boss, sige na, tanggapin mo na, okay na sa akin yan?
yes, yes. And I always hate that. And I tell them, then let me do my job. Right. If you're falling for their threat, then what's my value?
Right.
Right. I mean, you only get to play basketball for X number of years. So you want to maximize what you can get. Right. So we're not even talking about, NBA money. If we were talking about NBA money, maybe, just because you want to be able to maximize your minutes, or you'll fit with your team. But, we're talking about a different type of currency here, man. It's peso. So, the cost of living in the Philippines is low, but still, you want to be able to maximize. So the moment you say, to your point, if you beg and just agree to whatever terms that they're saying, then what's my value? Then don't get me anymore. So they know that. I mean, I can name you all my players who would say that. And fortunately, 9 out of 10 times, they agree to me. It's just a longer process, because for other deals, 1 week, that's done. But for them, for me, it takes 3 to 4 weeks until I get something that I'm really, really happy and secure with.
What's it like when you lose players to other agencies? Is that tough?
It
How was the
is. It is.
relationship after that? Because
It's
you probably went to bat for these players years in meetings,
mhm.
conversations, long nights. So when they leave suddenly, especially without explanation, which I hear happens to a lot of agents in the country, it must be very difficult.
It is difficult. Fortunately, I've never experienced anything sudden. There's always been a conversation. But to answer that, bluntly, it's a breakup. So it's like losing, your homie, your friend,
Exactly.
right? So it's tough. And then, you understand later on. It's just that you don't see eye to eye. So, you know, um, you want to remain calm. You want to be professional. So you definitely know that you're going to be seeing him or her anytime, because
Small
you're
world.
always in it. Not just that, it's you see each other in the venue, in
Yep.
games. So, but you keep it professional. I'll never, hold anything against them. So, but it's a process. And fortunately for our team, for me, we've lost less than three players over the last 9 years. And I can share everything that went through, but the initial meet, when they say that they're leaving, or they feel, or there also been times when I'm the one who would tell them that this may not be it for you.
What's a situation like when a player was still represented by another agent reaches out to you and say that they want to go to your agency, that's when
Hmm.
it gets a little tricky because, like you said, you're gonna run into people at the venues, at the games, and you're gonna run into other agents too. And
Yes.
you don't ever want to have that awkward conversation where someone goes to you and says, "Ninakaw mo player ko," which I've heard has happened in different games, right? Um, but what's that situation like? Do you tell them, sorry, no, if you're under contract to someone else, I don't want to be the mistress?
Two things that I always check: do you have an existing deal, right? If they do, then I make sure that we communicate, but I would tell them not to transfer.
Hmm.
I would make sure to communicate that they don't transfer because they should honor. The second thing is if they're really unhappy with the services or everything, that's when I want to make sure it's mutual between him or her and agency. Then that's when I would come in. But if there have been a couple of moments where it's just a verbal agreement. They've never really signed anything. I'm even the one who would call the agent that so and so is moving to me, just to
Hmm.
give them that chance,
The heads up.
right? And for me, and I told you this when we were talking briefly, it's always healthy competition for me, right? A lot of people would say stuff behind each other's back, but for me, there's no time for anything negative. It's just about understanding, what are you doing well, and what am I doing that you're not doing, really. But outside of the Philippines, it's brutal. Sports management outside of the Philippines is insane, man. And I've experienced that twice, where they don't give a fuck. If you have a contract, but I have something better for you, and the player agrees, then you're done. So I've experienced that. I mean, at the B League level, that happens regularly, man. That's just why I'm fortunate that all of my players really, really trust me.
And that's the spirit of it, the brotherhood, right? The camaraderie.
Exactly.
So is that your why? Why did you become a sports agent? Why do you, you know, go to bat for all these guys that you represent? I mean, yes, it's a friendship, and yes, it's a livelihood too. We should say that sports
Hmm.
management is a business, but there's got to be that extra sense of character in you that is innate that makes you want to do this because it's one thing to have to do it, it's another thing to want to do it. And based on the conversations I've had with you being a sports agent, it's something that you want to do, not just you have to do as a job.
Yeah, it all goes back to the love for basketball, and I've I've always wanted to pursue basketball as a career, whether it's playing, coaching, or being an agent. As far
Was
as
it
I can
was
remember,
this what you
man.
thought during your party days? Because you used to have your party days, right?
Probably, but the thing is, I mean, everybody has their own story about a sport they love, and for me, and especially for Filipinos, my love for basketball goes super deep, man. I can remember me being a 5-year old, just understanding that basketball is going to change my life. So I share this with you because this is just how passionate I am with basketball. In 1989, this is I was 9 years old, man. This was the first time that the NBA came out with NBA hoop cards. The
Mm.
NBA only had 27 NBA teams. I had a complete roster of all the teams
All
from
players of
A,
all
all
teams.
the players. So my mom would always tell me because whenever I would have challenges with my academics, she would always remind me, why can't you be as passionate with school, just like how you are with basketball? I'll tell you that. So my mom and my dad, because we're four boys, me and my three brothers, we've always been, fans of the game. Also because, my dad is the biggest one. And from each player at that time, that roster, I didn't memorize it. I knew their careers. I knew everybody. And then imagine this era from the 90s when you had NBA Live, when you had Larry versus, Jordan versus Bird. And all the players that I was seeing on my screen, I knew them. So there wasn't cable. So this was we're talking about the UHF era, FEN. So we had you would be able to watch the Detroit versus the Lakers in the finals. I'll tell you, man, Naveen, I'm not exaggerating. I was probably 8 or 9. I was the biggest Magic Johnson fan,
Mm.
right? So
Lakers.
fast forward, so I'm a diehard Laker. So when Kobe had his, last few games, I was there, and this was before he announced his retirement. So somehow, in my head as a Kobe guy, like I knew, but I'm sure there are millions of us saying that, right? So exactly. So when I was playing, at the elementary level, high school level, I wasn't as, you know, uh, dedicated, if I may, in terms of understanding the process. I was okay. I would feel, I was at that level where I could play. But like what you shared, there were other things that I was also paying attention to that somehow, delayed the progress from a performance angle, right? The next best thing was coaching. So I was coaching early, right? At the at the school level. I was coaching at Ateneo. This was in 2001. I was helping my brother. I was an assistant for him. And at that time, there was nothing else that I, saw that I could really be good at, right? Because I just limited it to basketball. And one thing that really, stuck to me is if you do something that you love, you're never gonna, work a day in your life.
That's true. Very
And
true.
that's so true. So for me, the next best thing is to work for a sports company. And fortunately, because of partnerships, connections with my friends, my brother, I was able to join first. I don't know if you're familiar with Thorlo Socks. So it's a sock base from North Carolina, and
Mm.
this was very technical, and I knew that also because of basketball. So they had a sock for each category, for sports category. So basketball, tennis, running. So at a young age, I was already doing that. I was working
Retail.
with the group retail with Elson's Enterprises. Um, and I was hired at the age of 25. So I knew it was about sports. And then fortunately, within that year, I had an opportunity to join a sports company, which was Nike, right?
Thank you,
So
Philippines.
that's when, yes, so that's when somehow things opened up from a corporate angle. At the same time, at the back of my head, I still had basketball, basketball, basketball. So I wanted to do management as early as 2006, 7. But the challenge was at the time I knew that if I wanted to do this, I had to be, 100% committed. It can't be, I'm doing my job and then I have another thing, this was when I understand it somehow, early parenting, right? So when you inject the knowledge and the passion for the game, and then you have that, guidance that you provide, then that for me is a recipe for success in terms of management. So that's how it all, um, boiled down for me.
That's awesome. Well, in short amount of time, you guys have done great work at Titan Management Group and the other Titan brands, and I'm sure there will be a lot more work to come with everything that's going on. Basketball is such a global game now, like you said, it's borderless. There are opportunities left and right, and the game has given so many opportunities in addition to just the players. I mean, you become a sports agent. Titan as a business is running. Us in the media, we get to watch and write and talk about games for a living, which I resonate with what you said about if you love your work, it doesn't feel like you're working a day in your life. And that's so true. There's also commercial side of it, advertising, merchandise, so many different factors now. The game has grown, it's evolved, and the parts that go with it evolve too. PJ, thanks so much for joining me tonight, man. It's a pleasure finally having you on the podcast. I'll be seeing you around at the games, and I hope to have you on this podcast again in the future. Thanks a lot, man.
Thanks, Naveen. See you soon.